Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. The first story today is about a controlling boss who thought power made him untouchable. After abusing his position, sabotaging a relationship, and hiding a very dangerous secret in his office, he learned years later that patience can be far more devastating than confrontation. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. He fired the wrong woman and paid for it years later. This was several years ago. So my boss, an extreme type A personality, found out I was seeing a young lady at another one of our offices. It was a long-distance relationship. He was the type who liked to control everything and mess with people for fun. He was also married to another employee, but he was very unfaithful, and he had a hobby, photography. He liked to take pics of himself and his conquest in the act. Then he would show the pics around the production floor and brag about it. Well, on his next trip to this other office, he tried to get my girlfriend to sleep with him, but she spurned him. He made up some lies and got her fired. It took a long time, but I was patient. I knew he kept the photos in his office. He could not risk keeping them at home where his wife might stumble upon them. One Saturday, I was working OT, and the cleaning lady came through. They unlocked his office. I came in acting like I was taking dimensions on some drawings. The lady just asked me to close the door when I was finished. She left and went down toward accounting. That's when I went through his desk. Sure enough, in the back of one drawer, I found a stack of photos 4 inches tall. I took them all. Then I waited until he went on another trip. When he did, I went out for lunch. I had a dozen pics of him in the act with 4 different women, all showing his face. The women all had dark or red hair. His wife's a blonde. I drove to the town he lived in, to the closest post office to his house, and mailed the pics to his wife with no return address. She divorced him, and her lawyer took him to the cleaners. My girlfriend is now my wife, and we aren't mad anymore. Why wouldn't you send one pic at a time, over years? Like, if he ever gets married again, send his fiancée one? His children should get one too. And our second story. My manager lied about flexibility and threatened to fire me for taking an exam. I passed, quit, and made sure no one would replace me. I used to work in a state-owned company, and you could only become employed in it if you passed a public selection program. I was in the first batch of people that came in, and there should be 4 other batches. There were a lot of vacancies in the company as well. When I got in, people in my area of expertise got internally interviewed, so we would get directed to the company sections that best suited our skills, but we'd also be interviewing back the managers. When it was my turn to ask questions about management, I was ensured that there was flexibility regarding work hours since I regularly took other selection programs away from the city, and I'd need to be absent from work sometimes or work remotely in different days of the week. I was selected, and my manager soon started her vacations. Company policy also stated that we could use our overtime hours to miss a day's work if our manager allowed, and that work-from-home days could be changed at the manager's discretion. Not long after, I had to do a public selection that required my absence during a Monday, trip day, and a Tuesday. Exam day would take about 4 hours. I asked to use all the overtime hours I accumulated so I could miss Monday, and then asked if I could remote work from the hotel at Tuesday, since I had no flights that would allow me to get to work. Also, because my usual work from home would also be a day in which I would have a remote class that was ordered by my manager. I had yet another reason for the change, since if the class was any other day, I would actually get 2 work from home days. The substitute manager apparently went to check with her before allowing it, and I was told I wouldn't be able to use my overtime to miss 1 work day because of an exception to the company policy I was never told about. You could only actually use your OT hours to miss work during holiday season, and it was written in an internal document of my area. Since I had to do that exam because it was a much nicer position, I would take a 1-day hit to my paycheck. On Monday, which was the day previous to my exam, my manager, who was taking vacation time, texted me at 10 p.m. right before I was going to sleep and told me that I was also not allowed to change my work from home day as well, since 1, it would only be allowed on extraordinary circumstances, and having an exam and wasting my work from home day in a remote class wasn't an excuse, and 2, I also would need to ask for it weeks before, no stated reason. I told her those things were not what we discussed during the interview and that it was impossible for me to show up on the next day because there were no flights that would allow me to get to work on time. She also threatened me with a poor review for missing 2 days of work so I could actually get fired. And even if I wasn't fired, I wouldn't get promoted either. I barely slept because not only I would have a very important exam, but also because if I failed it, I would not only not take the position, but could also get fired. Thankfully, the scores were published on Wednesday, the day after, and I managed to get a good enough score to pass, but I likely would have gotten a better one if I had slept well, and scoring better gives you better things at the new position. On the next day, she returned from her vacation, and I gleefully told her I was quitting in about 2 weeks because I passed to that much nicer position. She congratulated me and then almost literally went running to HR so she could ask for one person to fill my position in the next batches of the new hires. One problem, though. A lot of people are not even coming to sign the contract with the company because the pay is not that good given the requirements for the position. So what would be 60 people they could call from the public selection list, only about 40 are going to come. And I'm the second person in 2 months that was quitting. No one knows when the next public selection process will occur. It might take years for a new one. And here's the revenge part. I told all the people of the next batches that she was a horrible manager and everything she did to undermine me. When she tries to get someone to fill my position, no one will want it, and she's desperate for someone to work under her because there are a lot of people that are going to retire from the company. My former position is very likely going to stay vacant for a very long time, and she's going to get overworked, and my boss can only blame herself for lying to me about flexibility regarding work hours, threatening to give me a bad review, and make me miss 2 days' worth of paycheck. Had she allowed me the flexibility I was promised, I would have told everyone how great of a position it was. And to show how much of an a-hole she is, in the next week, a coworker, one of the people that are going to retire, asked to change her work from home day because she had to get her dog to the vet because of an emergency. She got the change even though she asked it on the very same day she would miss work. Sure, getting your dog to the vet's justifiable, but so were my reasons. The boss was sabotaging you. That's why she made sure to ruin your sleep the day before your exam, threatening to fire you and just making you upset and mess with your head. Glad you were able to persevere despite her attempts. And our next story. The look on her face when the police ticketed her for blocking my driveway was better than any apology. I don't even own a car, can't afford one, don't need one, but I do have a driveway, a simple little strip of concrete right next to my neighbor's identical strip. No garage on either property, barely enough space for one vehicle each, 2 driveways, 2 houses, 2 cars. Simple. Or at least it should have been. My neighbor, Rachel, used to have her compact SUV. Then she let her charmingly aggressive husband slither back into her life, and suddenly a massive minivan showed up like a permanent tumor on the property line. Half a year ago, I finally had to call the police because they kept blocking my driveway with their circus of poorly parked vehicles. The officers didn't ticket them, which was disappointing, but they did warn them to stop, and for a while they listened. Sort of. Their system was easy. Long minivan goes up the driveway, short SUV sits halfway on their lawn, halfway on the sidewalk. Not ideal, but at least my driveway was clear. But lately, lazy doesn't even begin to describe it. They just back the minivan up wherever it lands, often leaving its enormous rear end stretched halfway across my driveway like an unwanted guest taking a nap. Sure, I don't park a car there, but delivery drivers do. My elderly mother's ride service does. Visitors do. It's my driveway, not a community overflow lot. And every time I saw that minivan butt hanging over my concrete, my blood pressure ticked up just a little more. But let me back up, because the real feud didn't start with a car. It started with a dog. A very loud, very untrained, very miserable dog. Rachel would let that poor creature sit outside from sunrise to sunset, barking nonstop, barking constantly. I'm talking industrial grade, soul piercing, my ears are bleeding barking. My mother, who's in her 80s, takes afternoon naps, and the noise would startle her awake every single day. So I went over, politely, stupidly politely, and asked, "Hey, could you maybe bring your dog inside when it's barking? My mom's trying to rest." Rachel didn't say a word. She just slammed the door in my face like I'd suggested she sacrifice her firstborn. And thus the war began. Police wouldn't help with the barking. Animal control shrugged, so I turned to the internet and found salvation. A handheld anti-bark device. Press a button, it emits a sound only dogs can hear, not harmful, just irritating enough to make them stop. I'd point it, give a little beep, and miraculously the dog would shut up and go inside. That alone was satisfying. Then there was the trespassing. When they parked close, they'd step all over my grass, walk across my yard like it was just extra sidewalk. I finally had to get the police involved again and had them officially trespassed. Now they have to squeeze themselves out of their car like clowns spilling out of a hatchback. Not my problem. But the driveway issue, that remained. And it was getting worse. Last week I walked outside and found the minivan fully blocking my driveway. Not just a little overhang, completely unusable. I snapped a photo, took a breath, and decided to knock on Rachel's door one last time before escalating. She opened the door holding a toddler and looking annoyed before I even spoke. "Rachel, your van's blocking my driveway again. Come on, OP, you don't even have a car. I have deliveries, visitors, emergency access. It's my driveway." "Look," she said, adjusting her kid, "stop making everything a big deal. We don't have space for 2 cars. You have space. You let it sit empty all day." "That's because it's my driveway." She shut the door in my face. That was the moment I realized something. She wasn't parking like this because she had no choice. She was parking like this because she thought I wouldn't do anything about it. Oh, sweet summer child. The next time the minivan overlapped onto my driveway, which took less than 48 hours, I called the police non-emergency line again. This time I didn't sugarcoat it. "Hi, I need to report an ongoing driveway blockage. They've been warned before. I'd like an officer out to ticket the vehicle." The dispatcher sighed, they always do, but agreed to send someone. While waiting, I stood on my front steps like a sentry. Rachel peeked through her blinds repeatedly, obviously aware. The officer arrived, took one look, and said, "Yeah, this is a violation." Rachel burst out her front door immediately. "Wait, I'll move it," she yelled. "No, ma'am," the officer said. "You've been warned previously. Step away from the vehicle." Watching her freeze like a deer in headlights was the closest thing I've had to a religious experience. She got the ticket, a hefty one. And the best part, the officer added, "If this happens again, tow trucks become involved." She glared at me as if I'd personally ruined her life. Good. Since then, the minivan has magically learned how to park in her own driveway again. The SUV even fits too. Though now it's halfway on her lawn. Again, not my problem. As for the barking dog, still quiet, very quiet. I think it finally learned I'm not the one to mess with. And Rachel, she won't make eye contact with me. Perfect. It's telling how quickly her attitude changed the moment her choices carried a financial cost. Before that, she dismissed your request because she believed in a hierarchy where her needs were above yours. Once the officer intervened, the situation became objective, a violation, not a neighborly disagreement. People who rely on informal power crumble when formal authority shows up. And our last story. He destroyed my crops for a thrill. One day, the thrill came with a tow truck and a hefty repair bill. I'm a farmer, and for a long stretch, my biggest headache wasn't weather, wasn't pests, wasn't equipment breakdowns. It was one neighbor with an off-road truck and the impulse control of a wet match. My field runs right along a bend in the county road. Most people take that bend the way nature and asphalt intended. Not this guy. He treated the curve like a personal insult and my property like a shortcut built for his amusement. You always heard him before you saw him, that deep, throaty rumble as he gunned the engine, then the sudden roar when he left the pavement and dove straight across my corn as if my livelihood were some kind of backwoods racetrack. Every time he did it, he carved a broad, ugly wound right through the rows, a wide rut of smashed stalks, compacted soil, and spinning tire mud leading back to the road like a breadcrumb trail of stupidity. I tried everything a reasonable person tries. I put up fences. He flattened them. I posted no trespassing signs. He ignored them. I walked over one day, tried to have a neighborly conversation. He actually laughed in my face. "Relax, man," he said, waving a hand over the stretch of ruined plants. "Your corn will grow back." Corn does not grow back after being pancaked by a multi-ton steel toy with monster tires. Once it's crushed, that yield is gone. And he knew it. He just didn't give a damn because the land wasn't his. After one particularly bad run, deep ruts, rows destroyed, and bits of my fencing tangled under his tracks, I stood there staring at the mess and felt something in me click into place. Not anger, not spite, just a quiet, settled decision that this was the last time he got to treat my land like a dirt track. So I grabbed a steel T-post, not a flimsy decorative stake, a real heavy fence anchoring post meant to hold back livestock and whatever else life throws at a farm. I walked it straight to the path he always took, because he never varied it, lazy people rarely do, and drove it deep into the earth. I anchored that thing until it felt welded to the bedrock. When I stepped back, about 2.5 feet of solid steel stood proud and sharp, obvious to anyone on the road, completely invisible to a man barreling through someone else's property without looking. Then I went about my week, didn't mention it to anyone, didn't bring it up at the cafe in town, didn't even think much about it until a week later. I was driving into town for supplies when I rounded the bend and saw a set of hazard lights strobing in the early light. A tow truck sat half on the shoulder, and in the ditch sat my neighbor's prized off-road truck. But it didn't look so proud now. The front bumper was peeled open like a sardine can. Steam hissed from a cracked radiator. One tire hung at an angle tires are not meant to hang. Pieces of plastic and metal glittered everywhere. Even from inside my truck, I could see the telltale line of crushed corn leading straight to the spot where the T-post waited patiently. I didn't stop, didn't need to. The situation spoke for itself. And you know what? Not a word was ever said to me. Not a shout, not a complaint, not a knock on my door. Nope, he handled that wreck and then handled his silence. But one thing changed immediately and permanently. The shortcut died that day. The entire stretch of field healed, the corn grew tall, straight, and healthy again, the way it should have been all along. Sometimes respect comes from a single piece of steel standing its ground, and the unmistakable sound of a tow cable tightening in the distance. The fact that he never confronted you afterward says more than any argument could have. Complaining would have required admitting he was trespassing and destroying property. Silence was his way of accepting that he'd finally crossed something that wouldn't bend out of his way anymore. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.